It's no secret that horror and VR go together really well, and this week we have a brand new launch, a new horror game coming to MetaQuest headsets, Evil Inside VR. Evil Inside VR is actually an adaptation of a flat-screen game called Evil Inside. It launched a few years ago on console and PC and has been fairly well received. But the VR edition is different. This isn't a straight port, nor is it a sequel. According to the developers, it is a reimagining of that original story. Reimagining built for VR. And the hallmarks of a game that has made a jump from flat screen to VR are evident, specifically in the storytelling. There are sequences in the game where story moments are driven by what would have been cutscenes in a flat screen game and are presented using in-game graphics on a almost cinema-style screen in the VR space. It's strange, but it's okay. It's not a terrible idea. It really does feel like they've just captured the video from the console or PC versions and kind of just transplanted it into VR. That's an aside. That's not how the game plays. That's just how some of the story beats are delivered. The game itself is fully VR. And when I say fully VR, I don't mean just a simple making the flat screen version work with 360 vision and hands. It really does feel like the developers have tried their best to make a VR game here. A game that has been built for VR. The level of atmosphere is simply top tier for VR productions, for VR horror productions. The game is a real slow burn. It takes quite a lot of time to get going. The opening sequence, in fact, has you wandering through the same corridor a dozen or so times. But each time you do, things are different. Something has slightly changed, and it's up to you to find what's changed and interact with it, and thus, on your next run through, something else will be different. There's some light puzzle solving, but it's not particularly intense. Find a picture, enter a number into a key box, and so on. The game is more about being in that space, being afraid in that area, in that unique environment that Evil Inside offers. When I say it's slow, I mean both in the way that the game progresses and also your character movement. You are actually moving at a snail's pace for this environment, and I'm not sure if that's being done to drive tension or just to make it more comfortable for the player or what it might be. But I complained previously about the Siberia remake, which you can see our review up here, having incredibly slow movement when you're walking along large spaces, and Evil Inside kind of does the same thing. In that first opening sequence, which is all we're going to show in this video because we don't want any spoilers, but in that first opening sequence where you're walking down the same corridor several times, you can turn the corner and see that the door at the end is open and you just need to walk along it. And it feels like it takes forever. Couldn't find any kind of speed up or sprint mechanic or anything like that. You're simply walking down the same corridor you've already walked down 10 times to reach that door and see what is new that lies beyond it. And later in the game, things don't actually speed up at all. It is about building tension, so I can understand why they're restricting movement at some times, why they don't want a sprint mechanic. This isn't Resident Evil. It's not an action experience at all. But at the same time, if you're going to tread over the same ground again and again and again and again, maybe an option to increase the movement, maybe even just 10% would have been nice. Just a click of that stick to walk a little faster down this corridor because you already know where you want to go. While you're doing this, walking around these corridors or later on open spaces, all set around the same thematic, all set around the same venue essentially, you will find that the game designs itself to be creepy mixed with jump scares. Evil Inside VR is not particularly original in the way it delivers its horror. There are creepy sound effects and lighting effects that happen, and occasionally just random out of nowhere jump scares that happen. And that's really what this game is. It's basically a walking simulator with jump scares embedded. Occasional puzzles to solve, which don't really tax you that much, but instead you're just going through the story. You're walking through this world and learning about what's happened and why you're there at a really slow pace. And for horror game enthusiasts, that's probably not a bad thing. So many horror games these days have an emphasis on combat or action, And sometimes that diminishes from the atmosphere with which the game is made. But Evil Inside VR doesn't do any of that. It is all about you in this foreboding world with occasional creepy things happening or jump scares, flashes of light and so on. So it does really immerse you in this environment, in the atmosphere that the game creates. And it actually does a really good job of making sure that you stay in this creepy atmosphere, that you're not pulled out by too much exploration or so on. You can't interact with too many objects in the world. There are a lot of objects that will look like you can interact with them, but they don't do anything. And you can collect pieces of a Ouija board, which builds up over time, and ultimately this, I assume, is the key mechanic of the game, that you are exploring through these environments, trying to piece together this Ouija board. It never actually explains what you're doing. It never really gives you an objective. You are just moving through the world, discovering the plot as you go. And obviously I'm not going to put any spoilers here about what the plot actually is. We don't want to ruin the game for people watching this video. But I will say that just like the way in which you move through the world, it is slow to develop. The game definitely has you feeling like you're going around in circles a little bit before you make any actual progress through the world and the storyline. So with that in mind, Evil Inside VR is definitely not the first horror game I would recommend to newcomers to VR or people who aren't particularly fans of horror. If you want to try something at Halloween to get a bit spooked out, there are a dozen other games that I would recommend above Evil Inside VR. But for horror game fans, the slower pace and the lack of any kind of combat is a bit different to what we experience in VR quite regularly. It's not something that's going to jump out at you and say, I must buy this game and I must see what's going on here, try something new, because it's really not new. It's just a bit different. And for that, for horror game aficionados, people who love their horror games in VR or not, yeah, go ahead, jump into Evil Inside VR, especially if you haven't tried it in flat screen. Try it in VR first, because I'm sure that this will end up being seen as the superior version of the game. However, if you're not looking for something new, if you like your Resident Evil style horror, Evil Inside VR just isn't going to do it for you. CodeSync is a studio that has a history stocked full of amazing VR experiences. From way back with Esper on the original Gear VR through Jurassic World, right up to the recently launched Men in Black, all of these have been fantastic and deserving of VR in one way or another. However, the most recently launched title, Skytail, I'm not sure it lives up to that pedigree. Skytail has arrived and is now available for MetaQuest headsets, and on the surface, it looks like an interesting arcade-style shooting game with maybe a little bit of pet simulation in there. But in practice, it's much more boring than it sounds. The game has you walking around a very colourful world, very small slices of a very colourful world, occasionally engaging with your pet, Skytail, and generally not doing very much. It then switches between walking around these little island levels to sky-based combat in which Skytail, you're flying on the back of this giant beast, just flies in straight forward in a singular direction. And all you have to do is point at enemies and move them around a bit. maybe point at an object and throw it at those enemies. It's really basic. And then there are moments in between where you go to this fantastical mystical realm when you unlock new abilities and so on, but they don't really add much to the formula. So I'm wondering, what went wrong with Skytail? On paper, the game seems pretty interesting. Almost like a VR space harrier. You're flying along on this giant beast and taking down enemies as they come towards you through the sky. You know, think Panzer Dragoon, but in VR. And that is appealing. That sounds great. And then you have this little island exploration bit, an on-foot exploration section where you can go and interact with different objects in the world. You can destroy enemy infections that have taken over certain bits of the island. You can cook up food to feed to your beast. It all sounds really interesting. But in play, it's really, really dull. There's not one point during my entire time playing Skytail for this video that I actually felt like, hey, you know what? I want to keep playing this. Often when I review good games, and especially when I was doing Men in Black, I was playing and wasn't ready to stop and record a video because I wanted to play more. I didn't get that at all with Skytail. I knew all of these individual pieces sounded great, and in my mind I was telling myself, I must be missing something here. But never did it all click in. Never did all these individual aspects of Skytail come together to make something that actually felt appealing. It's a real shame because Coatsink is a studio that you would have thought, you know, they've got their VR chops now. They know what they're doing. And maybe they went through the same process. Maybe during designing of Skytail with all these disparate parts coming together, they thought this would make a compelling experience. But ultimately, it doesn't. The sky-based combat is so basic. It's literally just pointing at an enemy and grabbing them, and then shaking them about, or grabbing another object and throwing it at them. And there's nothing really much more to it. You do unlock new abilities as you go, and new moves that change things. We're not going to show any of them in this video here, because we don't want spoilers in case you do dive in. But you can see from the footage that we have got, that we've got a few abilities unlocked, and really nothing changes. You get some armoured enemies, which take longer for you to crush. You get spiked enemies, which you can't crush, and you must throw an object at them first. And enemies do progress through complexity in this way, meaning that you are required to do different things in order to weaken them to use your crush move. But honestly, it's never interesting enough to make you want to explore different combinations. The most fun Skytail gets is when you have two enemies that counteract each other and you bash them together. And that's fun for all of maybe 5 minutes. So what else is there beyond this in Skytail? There's a storyline that's delivered. I mean, there's no direct speech in Skytail. It's delivered visually, and it's okay. But there are far too many loading sequences where you're like, okay, something's about to happen, and then it just cuts and nothing's actually really happened. The storyline is pretty basic. Your beloved beast has had its eggs stolen, and so you're on a quest to get them back, and it's not really very interesting. The beast itself is very nicely drawn. It's very well animated. It is believable in the creature that it is while you're in this space. It's not so massive that it takes up all of your vision, and it's not so small that it's not impressive. It's friendly, you can pet it and so on, but none of this really matters. Even to the point where at the very start of the game, one of the first objectives you've got is being taught how to cook food to feed to it. But then, the second or third time you come to this, it says you can feed Skytail, or just continue to the dock for your next mission. So what is the point? The game never explained to me what the point of interacting with Skytail beyond riding its back in the shooting sections. It never explained to me exactly why I was interacting with Skytail. Is it going to grow bigger? Is it going to get new abilities? None of this seems to matter, because I'm getting my new abilities from completing a level and entering this mystical realm, which is automatic. It's not like I'm choosing to go there because I've earned a certain amount of power-ups. So why would I care about interacting with Skytail? In fact, why would I care about these on-foot sections at all? Because there's nothing there. Why wouldn't I just do a Star Wing, Star Fox style experience of going level to level, shooting, increasing in difficulty as I go, unlocking new power-ups in between, which again are automatic. So again, Skytail, honestly, it's pretty boring. On paper, it may sound like a good time and a fun little distraction for a while, but there's so many better examples of on-rail shooters, which is essentially what Skytail is. There's so many better examples of on-rail shooters, both in VR and in flat screen, that I cannot see why this game is going to appeal. And yes, you could say maybe for younger players, for gamers who want to have a cutesy little character to interact with and then do an action sequence, maybe that's the audience for this game. But again, there are already dozens of games like this in VR that do each part of it so much better. So unfortunately, in my mind, Skytail is actually the first Coatsink VR game that has missed the mark. Some of Coatsink's previous titles have been innovative, but not so fantastic to play, and others have been fantastic to play, but not so innovative. Skytail fails in both regards. It is comfortable in what it's doing. I never had any issues with the VR-iness of the experience. No simulation sickness, no issues with frame rate or anything like that. But the gameplay itself is just pretty boring. So unfortunately for me, Skytail isn't one I'm going to recommend. Instead, definitely go and check out Men in Black, because that's good. Go and check out some of Coatsink's earlier titles, because they were good. But Skytail is not the one. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City has launched on MetaQuest and is arguably one of the biggest titles to launch in the first half of 2026. But can it live up to expectations? Stick around and you'll find out.
There's pizza on the table. Do what you gotta do and head out.
You could probably get the drop on him from up top.
Where's the fun in that?
Fine, going hot.
So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City is the last in a long line of big IPs that have come to VR. Some of the highlights of the recent years are, of course, Batman Arkham Shadow and Deadpool VR. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City has definitely taken lessons from these and other big-name games that have launched in VR. It is a straight-up action affair. You're not going to be doing much in the way of brain teasers. There are some light puzzles, especially when you're playing as Donatello, but nothing really that's going to tease your brain outside of the exploration and combat. But that's not a bad thing, because what Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles does do, it does pretty well. The storyline is kind of an abstract, convoluted way of basically being a familiar Ninja Turtles story while still respecting the canon that has existed before. I'm not going to go too deep into it. If you are a Ninja Turtles fan, you should be aware that the game does respect what is already out there. If you're not a Ninja Turtles fan, or a lapsed Ninja Turtles fan, as I would consider myself, absolutely loved them as a kid in the 80s and 90s, but I can't say I've kept up with recent events. If you're that kind of fan, you might be puzzled as to where in the timeline this game occurs, but you'll take it in your stride. Everything that happens here, it's all pretty much explained without telling you when it happens. It's all pretty much explained who is doing what and when and where pretty succinctly, so you'll get up to speed super quick. And all this happens before the tutorial to the game is actually done. Before you get set free in Empire City, you kind of know what's going on and where people are and who's the good guys and the bad guys. And catching up with what has been happening in this universe. And once that tutorial is over, you are afforded a lot of freedom, more than I was actually expecting with this game. So Batman Arkham Shadow, as freeform as elements of it was, it's still a very linear experience. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City is linear in the way its story develops, but it gives you quite a lot of freeform gameplay. You are literally just let out into the city and can explore at your will and engage with the environment in really freeform gameplay. There's loads of collectibles to find, loads of hidden items and objects and so on that don't really have much relevance, but are still fun and encourage you to explore the city. And there's also emerging gameplay moments. Like most open world games these days, there are encounters that occur randomly, and it's up to you whether you choose to engage with them or not. The game does make efforts at the start to encourage you to do these. It does force you to do several of them sequentially before allowing you to progress with the story. But once you have done this, it's really just at your own will. And you can engage with them or ignore them and continue the story as you so choose. There are a few moments where the game falls on the usual kill everything to continue, complete X amount of side missions to continue, and so on, to make the padding of the game a bit more. But honestly, it's all pretty good, so you're not really going to mind. The combat is very much action, 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 action. Of course, you've got the 4 turtles that you can play as, and each one of them does play slightly differently. They have different weapons and thus different ranges and different movesets and so on. It's not as tight as Batman or Marvel's Deadpool VR. It is often just a case of waggle and you can get through. But I wouldn't expect it to be. Those 2 titles, which are still standout games on the MetaQuest headset, were huge budgets. And while I don't know what Ninja Turtles' budget was, I could expect it to be substantial, but still nowhere near what Batman and Deadpool had. So you do expect it to be a bit looser. You do expect it to be influenced and inspired by those games rather than matching them for its quality, for its production values. And it does a really good job in this respect. It is pretty close, if not on the same level. The variety of the different movesets that the characters have, that the 4 turtles have, is nice. Especially when you launch into what is arguably Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City's biggest selling point, the co-op gameplay. Now this is something that Batman Arkham Shadow and Marvel's Deadpool VR completely ignored. Co-op gameplay in Ninja Turtles is fun. Like, super fun. You're still able to explore around the city and do things as you so choose. There are a few more limitations when it comes to the story mode and so on, but not so much that you're going to complain. It's just noticeable. And being able to engage with your friend roaming around this open city, taking on exploration and completing these missions as you so choose, it's a free-form gameplay. It's an open playground that is super popular in a lot of games these days, but here it actually has substance. The storyline explains away the fact that the city is completely empty of human life other than the bad guys and so on, so that's fine. You don't really care about this. And the traversal abilities that you have, jump in, sprint, jump, dive attack, and climbing and so on, they do make it a fun playground to explore. So I would say that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City, as things stand, is probably the best open world experience that I have played in VR so far this year. Recently in our Saturday features here on 131XR, we talked about the best action games, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Empire City definitely deserved its place in this video. It's still, as I say, it's not Batman, it's not Marvel's Deadpool, but it is still a really high quality action experience in VR. You're not going to use your brain. It's not going to challenge you to think in a different way other than bash the bad guy and save the day. But as I said in Marvel's Deadpool VR review, sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes in VR, just being cool and kicking enemies' ass is all you need. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, while it's arguably not the absolute top tier of what VR can deliver, it is a really, really close approximation of that.
Cool, I know, but also crime?
Attention all units, intel saying we got a weapons deal in progress. Stop any suspicious looking ninjas.
Here we are. Challenge found and pounded down.
Fine work.
So if you were sitting on the fence about whether or not you should dive in with Ninja Turtles, if you have a buddy that wants to do it with you, don't hesitate. Go ahead and download this game and you'll have a great time. But if you're going to be playing solo and you're still on the fence about Ninja Turtles, maybe take your time, explore around what your favourite creators are saying before you make your mind up. When it comes to rhythm action games in VR, Beat Saber is still the one that everybody wants to try and beat. And there is no shortage of games that are attempting to do this. Right up now, though, is Beat the Beat, now finally available for MetaQuest and PC VR. Beat the Beats originally launched on PlayStation VR back in 2024, and now it's finally available on PC VR and MetaQuest. And for the purposes of this review, we used the MetaQuest 3S, as we always do here on this channel. And honestly, there are lots of rhythm action games on the MetaQuest, as you can see in our video on the best rhythm action games. But what Beat the Beats does is it basically takes all the lessons learned from all these other games and polishes them really, really well. Beat the Beats doesn't do anything particularly original. Instead of using a Beat Saber for your rhythm action games, basically it replaces your hands with fists. I think maybe they're supposed to be boxing gloves, but they don't really feel that way. It's more like just a clenched fist the whole time. And similar to Synth Riders and Audio Trip and all the other big VR rhythm action games, you simply have blocks coming towards you, which you must punch. There is a great level of detection, the quality in the detection of your punches and also your dodging to a lesser extent, so that you get really solid feedback as to whether you're hitting them, whether you're too slow, whether you're absolutely missing them, which was something that was unfortunately missing from the game we recently reviewed, Beat Bats, which you can see at the top right now. In that game, it had a much more comprehensive playlist, song list options for tracks that you can play along to, and a lot more customization, but the player feedback was the missing element. Beat the Beats does not have this problem. The production values of Beat the Beats are extremely high, and this is why, as an alternative to things like Beat Bats and Beat Saber, I am very happy to recommend Beat the Beats as an option, as another rhythm action game that you should definitely be considering. Now, Beat Saber wasn't the first VR rhythm action game, not at all, but the success of that title did open the doors for lots of imitators. And I recommend Beat Bats as a free-to-play opportunity to get into this genre because of the catalogue that it has. Beat the Beats is undoubtedly a higher quality game, but it doesn't have the same depth in its catalogue. While all the songs that are included here are of high production values, it's mostly decent dance/poppy type songs. There's not that many recognisable artists. You're not going to be beating beats along with the likes of Metallica or 21 Pilots or any of those popular artists that have made their way into Beat Saber. Instead, it is going to be mostly DJs and pop music that you probably haven't heard of. It's not to say it's not good music, but you're not going to be finding your favourites in the track listing here. That said, there is actually a wealth of music here, and the progression system is really well balanced. You have different albums which contain a select amount of tracks, and as you progress through the game, you will unlock more albums that allow you to play new songs. It's pretty simple, right? But the progression system has different levels of unlocking. For example, one album may require you to beat a certain amount of beats in order to unlock it, whereas another one will require you to fully complete X amount of previous albums. And that's nice because they're all themed. And so you're like, oh, I wonder what's happening in that album, what tracks I'm going to get there. And this one requires me to play in a slightly different way to how I have been playing, to do different tracks. And so it does encourage you to explore everything that the game has. Sadly, there are limitations to exactly what the game does have. You start with the arcade mode, which is basically, a quick play, minute and a half to 2 minutes of a track, playing through, trying to get a high score, and you get graded at the end of it. More on that grading system in a minute. And as you complete each track, you subsequently unlock the next one in the playlist, or maybe two if you score really well, and then carry on, do more, unlock more. Arcade mode is exactly what you expect. There's also a daily mix, which is like a compilation of several different tracks put together for you to play through one after the other and set a high score on a leaderboard. Pretty simple stuff. Then there's also the challenges mode, and this I was very interested in, but unfortunately it's missed the mark considerably. Challenges are basically just mini games where they take certain elements and revise them in a little way to try and make something new of the really simple gameplay mechanics that are here, and frankly they're not very interesting. Which is a shame, because after the arcade mode, you do want more. You do want to find more depth. The gameplay is solid, but there's not enough ways to exercise it. The unlockable system, as I say, is nice. It encourages you to do different things, but there's nothing beyond that. There's no career mode or story or anything like that to keep you pulling back in. So while Beat the Beats has a really good foundation in its gameplay, there definitely needs to be more set dressing. Now about that scoring system, I'm confused. So on some tracks, early in the game of course, I managed to get a perfect score for the entire song and got a C ranking. And on other tracks, when I was intentionally messing up to see how the performance works, how the game acknowledges your failures and what feedback it gives, I was messing up considerably in order to attain that and still got a C rank. I'm not sure if that's because I was playing a harder song or a longer song or what it may be, but I'm not really sure how the ranking system works. The point system is obviously hit beats, get points. Miss them, don't. It's pretty straightforward. But that rank, I honestly, for the whole time I was playing the game, never got anything except a C. So I'm not entirely sure if there are issues with that or if it's just a scoring system that I don't really understand. But maybe devs, maybe take a look at this, because I would like to know my perfect score on a song is actually being recognised. So Beat the Beats has arrived on MetaQuest and also PC VR in pretty good form. It delivers exactly what it promises and is very high production values. It's clear, it's simple, it's direct, it's competent and it's confident. However, after some time playing the game and unlocking all the new modes and songs, you're still going to want more. Whether the developers are planning on bringing new modes in addition to new tracks and things that are, easy to add, relatively speaking. Whether we're ever going to see more depth and different gameplay modes, at this point I'm not sure. But Beat the Beats does stand as a really high quality rhythm action game for MetaQuest. If you're bored of Beat Saber and Beat Bats is a little too loose for you, Beat the Beats is a really good alternative. Video games about video game development are everywhere these days, so it's no surprise it's time for VR to get its own one, with Game Dev Simulator available now for PC VR and MetaQuest. But is it like the trending time management style games that we often get on mobile? Stick around and you'll find out. Game development games are an interesting breed. It was Game Dev Story launching over 10 years ago now, maybe even 15 years ago. The version of that launched for mobile kicked off a genre of games that were about running a game development studio. Or if you get good enough, a massive conglomerate of game development studios. And they saw massive success through the intuitive nature of playing a game about making games in a gaming world. It was context that people like myself can relate to. If you're into games, then you're going to understand how to play a game about making games. And the amount of in-jokes that you can have with the audience that know about this topic some of these games are actually very, very funny. But there's also another side to this theme, another genre that's occurred, which is time management games. And these are a bit different. Game Dev Story was a game that was made for gamers to offer comedic commentary on the games industry, and it was popular because of that. But the time management genre that has used game development as a set dressing is a different kind of thing. It's not really in joking and such. It's more like Shop and Craft, which we reviewed up here. So on which side of this fence does Game Dev Simulator lie? It's new release for MetaQuest and Steam VR, and we've been hands-on, and I can tell you, it's not really like either of them. Game Dev Simulator for VR is more akin to Job Simulator than it is a time management game. In this game, you have certain different tasks that have to be completed in order to earn currency to invest in games, and then you can play those games, or at least small sections of them. And it's fun. It's really fun. There are dozens of games that you can invest in. Obviously, in this video, we're only going to put a couple in because we don't want to put too many spoilers out there. But they do take the approach of Game Dev Story of having in-game jokes related to the subject matter. If you are a gamer, if you are familiar with gaming as a medium and not just playing the top 5 games every year, then you'll get these jokes. And they sometimes are funny, sometimes they fall a bit flat, but, you know, that depends on your sense of humour, surely. And these games are made with the intention of being bad games in a good game. Kind of a little bit like Pixel Ripped, except obviously the games in Pixel Ripped were pretty good. That's not the joke here. The joke in Game Dev Simulator is that you are managing a game development company and playing these games and giving feedback to the developers and so on, to the developers of the bad games. It's fun. And there's also loads of idle distractions that you can do. And everything that you do, regardless of whether it's actually pursuing your company and making new games or engaging with idle distractions that exist in your small stationary space within the world, it all blends together to add to your progression. You earn different kinds of currency depending on which objective you interact with. Main tasks earn one currency and side tasks earn another. And they can be spent to invest in other games or other such activities. I'm not going to spoil too much of this because there's a fair amount of depth once you get started. Now, these idle distractions can be simply things like smashing all your windows or making hook shots with bits of paper into the trash can. It's basic, but it's enjoyable. They are, as I suggested, idle distractions. They are little mini activities that you can partake in outside of the building and playing of the games. And so you have a small space in this world, a very small space, where everything that's interactable is within reach. And that's really well made. It's really well designed. There are lots of in-jokes for gaming, but also for VR. Just looking around the desk, you'll see a lot of influencers' names written on the desk with "was here," as if to say that they have been involved in this project in some way. Which I'm not sure if they have, but if they have, congratulations, guys. You've made a good game. But beyond this, there is more involved in the game beyond the idle distractions and beyond the clicking buttons to invest in these games. Each time you create a game and unlock a new objective, it does get progressively more involved. It's not simply a case of click, 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 oh, the game has been made, I'm going to play it now. That's how it starts. But as time goes on, you need more money and need to complete harder objectives in order to get that money. And this is really well paced. It's not like the time management genre that has involved the game development as a set dressing, where you're just a case of, I'm going to invest in this building and then I'm going to wait 10 minutes and it's going to give me some money back and I'm going to go invest in this and I'm going to buy new furniture for this one so that it makes more money, and so on and so on. It is more of a directly input to receive direct output scenario. You're not just waiting for things to happen. You are the active participant in making the money that you want to invest in the games that you want to invest in. It's kind of similar to Arcade Paradise. That was a flat screen game in which you ran a laundromat and would take the money from doing idle tasks in around the laundromat, cleaning up rubbish and picking off chewing gum and cleaning the toilet and so on. You would take the money you went from doing those activities, those idle side missions, distractions, and invest in upgrading your back room, which was your arcade, by adding new game cabinets and thus had more mini-games to play. If you imagine that in VR but in a stationary position, you're not going to be far off from what Game Dev Simulator is. And for those of you who have played Arcade Paradise and have some interest in the games industry, you will know that that was a good game. And Game Dev Simulator, it follows the same patterns. It may be more limited, but it is a really good experience, a really fun experience for people who are actively, passionately invested in the games industry and VR in particular. That being said, it doesn't do anything new. All of the side missions and comedic elements and whatever else, they are borrowed from other games. Very much similar to almost like a watered down version of Job Simulator. The interaction, the way in which you build your games and your currency, again, borrowed from other games. What Game Dev Simulator does is it takes the lessons, the best bits of a lot of other games and makes something different out of them, make something unique in the VR space. So with that, if you are invested in VR and you are invested in the games industry at large, I highly recommend Game Dev Simulator. It is a fun time. You will definitely find some of the humor amusing and you'll enjoy both the little distractions and the main game. If you're not that invested, if you don't know backstories to The Legend of Zelda and so on, this might not be for you.
Hey, it's Gwig. I forgot to tell you the controls even though they should be obvious anyway. It's WASD on keyboard, or you can use the gamepad.
So Game Dev Simulator deserves a bit more attention than it's got currently. It's not rewriting the rulebook on what makes a good VR game or what makes a good game dev game. But everything it does do, it does really well and definitely comes recommended if you are that kind of person that is invested in this industry. Protect My Cow landed on the MetaQuest store very recently and seemed to have appeared without much fanfare. It's one of those games that just kind of appeared out of nowhere and entered orbit on the MetaQuest platform. So now we're going to dive in and explore exactly what it is that this game offers. Protect My Cow is a shooting game. It's a flying spaceship shooting game, but it's not a flight simulator or anything like that. What it is almost like a cross between a tower defense game and an old school arcade game. You control a spaceship flying around full 360 degrees in front of you, a third person perspective controlling the spaceship flying around, and you have an island with a cow on it. And the idea of the game, obviously, is to protect my cow. What happens is that spaceships enter the playing field, the battle area, and you must maneuver your ship around the space, all over the place, to try and shoot them and take them out before they take your cow. It's relatively simple, but there is actually quite an amount of depth packed into this game. You can maneuver your ship in full 360, you can boost, you can brake, you can even hold momentarily in a very specific location, slightly tilt your ship up and down and around, ready to then boost off in a new direction. There are items that you can collect and bring to your cow to earn I think it's supposed to be DNA style currency or fusion, I can't remember what the symbol actually is, but this currency can then be used between levels to buy upgrades and even new ships. It's a really simple tried and tested formula, but it works, it's fun. There was a saying a few years ago that we are still in the early stages of VR, and I believe this. While the Oculus Rift DK1 and DK2 might be beyond EcoVision or so on, we're probably about the stage of the NES, the Commodore 64, devices like this. And so I would be happy to compare something like Protect My Cow to Asteroids or Donkey Kong, one of these early games that are showing what technology is capable of, what gaming can be, but it's still very simple compared to a modern game. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes the old arcade style, go in, have fun for 15 minutes, clock off. Sometimes that's all you need. The ship maneuverability in Protect My Cow does take quite a lot getting used to. The commands that you have are pretty basic, like I said, speed up, brake, pause. But it is controlled from a third-person perspective, and when you're off in the distance, you can often be thinking, oh, I'm going to maneuver up and turn left, but you can't see the nose of your ship because it's so far away. And so sometimes you'll be pivoting on a very small, what seems to be a very small axis because it's in the distance, and not realising that you're actually turning the opposite direction from what you're intending to do. Now this obviously just takes time adapting to the control system, much like MotorStorm RC on the PlayStation Vita, and I think later also got released on PlayStation 3. That game was much like Off-Road 4x4 from the late 80s, early 90s. The control system is relative to the vehicle, not relative to the player, and as such, it can take a bit of adapting to. But once you get it, it is very maneuverable. You are maneuvering in full 360 degrees on your axis of the ship, and then full 360 degrees on the axis of you as the player in the world. So there's a lot of opportunity for barrel rolls and looping over enemies and dodging side to side and so on to evade the enemy attacks while also getting your opportunity for a counter-attack. There's also different kind of weapons that you can employ and lots of different upgrades that you can take on board. If you're finding that your shields are going down too quick, upgrade that shield. I personally found that the main gun was a bit slow, so I invested a lot of my currency in upgrading that gun. And it does turn the tide. It does mean that some of these battles are more efficient. You can also simply just ram enemies and knock them off course, which is super helpful for the ones that actually come down to collect your cow rather than the ones that fly in space trying to take you out. And obviously the game is a comedy game, right? It's not funny, ha ha ha, but there are lots of ships that reflect very famous sci-fi ships. In the footage that you'll see in this video, you can definitely pick out the Enterprise as one of the inspired models for the ships in the game. One of the strengths of Protect My Cow is obviously the fact that it can be played in VR and MR. The VR version of the game basically just puts you in a black environment. It's like space, right? You place down the island with the cow on wherever you feel comfortable, and then it's just blackness around you. But you can also do this in your real-world living space, which obviously there was a big MR buzz about a year ago, and Protect My Cow was trying to take advantage of that. It just, arrived a bit too late. There's nothing particularly spectacular about playing in either VR or MR, so just choose whichever you're more comfortable with. It doesn't use the environment in the same way as like Crystal Commanders, for example, which you can see our review up here, which takes into account spatial differences and heights of furniture and so on. It doesn't do any of that. It just either has a black background or your real-world background, and it's as simple as that. The developers, since launching Protect My Cow, have continuously updated the game. In addition to the tutorial and a bunch of progressive levels with different waves and difficulties, Horde mode is like an endless mode. Enemies just keep coming and you have to take them out without dying, and it's pretty challenging before you invest in some of those upgrades. There's also a PvP mode listed on the menu, which means that there's going to be multiplayer coming to Protect My Cow. Really hope developers think this through properly, because otherwise I can see a scenario where you're just two endless ships spinning around in space and never actually getting into contact. Hopefully, it is a grander scale of multiplayer that they're intending to offer here, with maybe 5 to 10 players all going at once, all trying to get each other's cow while defending their own. That would be quite epic and also very confusing, which, is perfect for a game that is as simple and immediate as Protect My Cow. Protect My Cow is available now for £4.99 sterling, and obviously your local currency equivalent. For that price, it's a pretty fun time. There's nothing really egregious to say, no, don't try Protect My Cow. But also at the same time, there are tons of absolutely stunning VR games that are often on sale for a similar price point. So realistically, if you're looking for something a bit more immediate, a bit of arcadey fun that you don't have to think too hard about, go ahead and give Protect My Cow a go.
They're grabbing the cow. Stop them now. Warning. Cow integrity drop. Pilot, eyes up.
However, if there are some of the VR greats that you are yet to try and you're saving your £5 for when they go on sale, you know, Deck My Cow's going to slot in pretty low on that list. That's all there is to it, really. It's a fun, arcadey game, but it's never going to rewrite the rulebook. It's never going to be the game that sells VR to anyone new.